Enzo Ferrari once said, "Ask a child to draw a car, and he will undoubtedly make it red." This simple statement speaks volumes about the legendary status Ferrari has in the world of motorsport, where red isn't just a colour, it's an identity. So why, in the 1964 Formula 1 season, did Ferrari make the unthinkable switch to blue? To unravel this mystery, we must first delve into the significance of racing colours in motorsports, and why red has been synonymous with Ferraris. This story begins in the early 20th century, when the car racing scene decided to assign teams colours based on their nation, turning the cars into high-speed symbols of national pride. When you see this colour, you might immediately think of Lotus, Aston Martin, or even Bentley. This is British racing green, a colour which embodies the spirit of British racing teams. And again, when we see this colour, you might think it's red, but it isn't just any red. This is Rosso Corsa, representing Ferrari's fiery passion and relentless pursuit of victory. Both British Racing Green and Rosso Corsa have a history of automotive excellence, with Italy taking on the colour red after Fiat won the 1907 French Grand Prix race. Over in Germany, we have German Silver. It highlights their innovation and efficiency, its origin stemming from stripping paint for a weight advantage. This gave birth to the legendary Silver Arrows. French Blue painted a picture of France's pioneering role in motorsport, echoing the nation's flair and elegance on the racing circuit. Meanwhile, the American white and blue stripes symbolized a blend of tradition and modernity, marking the US's dynamic approach to motorsport. These colors did more than distinguish their cars on track. They represented a nation's prior rivalries, successes, and tragedies. They evoked emotions, stirred national pride, and even helped build a fan base, turning each race into a chapter of an overarching story. When a driver gets into a red Ferrari, they're not getting into any red car. They carry the might of Italy and the prestige of one of motor racing's greatest teams with them. As the sport evolved, these national colours adapted, with teams selling their paintwork to the highest bidder as the costs of competing in the sport rose. Only few teams' colours truly survived the onslaught of commercial sponsorships and maintained their core identity. Today, they stand as a testament to motorsport's rich history, a reminder of the days when a car's colour signified its origin and its team's ambitions. In this way, the importance of racing colours in motorsport transcends the aesthetic. They are the keepers of tradition, narrators of history, and symbols of pride and identity. So why then did Ferrari of all teams race in blue in 1964? Enzo Ferrari was a man of passion and pride. He loved racing and he loved his country. He built his racing empire on the foundations of excellence, innovation, and tradition. His cars were not only fast and beautiful, but also symbols of Italy's glory and the prestige in the world of motorsport. For Enzo, racing was not just a sport, racing was everything, and he always raced in red, the colour of Italy, the colour of Ferrari. He never compromised on his vision and standards, even if it meant clashing with authorities and the rules. In the 1960s, Enzo's racing empire was expanding into other categories outside of Formula 1. His cars had already gained remarkable accomplishments in events such as the Mille Miglia, and Ferrari had won 4 Drivers' Championships by 1960 in Formula 1. But they were now branching out even further, with Ferrari wanting to enter more factory cars than customer cars into these races. In 1962, Ferrari had built the 250 GTO, a masterpiece of design and performance. It was meant to compete in the GT category, but there was a catch. The rules at this time said that a number of road-going versions had to be built before a car was eligible to race. Ferrari claimed that he had built enough, but the FIA, the governing body, was not convinced. According to the stories of the past, Enzo Ferrari managed to trick the FIA. He showed them half the cars in one parking area, then took the FIA representatives for a lunch and coffee break before showing them the other batch in another area. Little did the FIA know, during that coffee break, Ferrari moved all the cars from the first location to the second, meaning they counted the same cars twice. Nonetheless, the FIA counted enough cars to be satisfied, and Ferrari could race the 250 GTO. Now, that story may not be entirely true, but it does help explain why in 1964, when Ferrari wanted to homologate a new car, the 250 LM, the FIA denied them the eligibility. The FIA could not see Ferrari building the required 100 cars, and they were less open to persuasion due to the previous incident. This didn't mean Ferrari couldn't race though. They told Enzo he could enter his car as a prototype, but not as a GT. This infuriated Enzo, who felt that the FIA was biased and unfair, and that they were favouring the British teams such as Lotus and BRM, who were some of Ferrari's main rivals at that time. He also felt betrayed by the ACI, the Italian national motorsport body, who did not support him in his argument with the FIA. This ultimately led to Ferrari declaring he'll never race in Rosso Corsa again. This decision shocked and outraged almost everyone. People saw it as a betrayal of the Italian national pride and identity. Ferrari had been racing in red since its debut in Formula 1 in 1950, and had many victories in this time. Red was not only the colour of Ferrari, but it was the colour of Italy in motorsport. To see Ferrari abandon its traditional colour and race under a foreign flag was unthinkable, and for many, unacceptable. But this also posed a problem for Enzo. He still had 2 races left in the 1964 Formula 1 Championship, and at this point in time, one of his drivers, John Surtees, had a good chance at winning the championship for both himself and Ferrari. To get around the issue, he chose to enter his cars under the North American Racing Team, or NART, a privateer team that was closely affiliated with Ferrari and operated by Luigi Chinetti, a former driver and importer of Ferrari cars in the United States. The colour scheme of NART was white and blue, the national colours of the United States, meaning the Ferrari cars would not race in red, but instead in white and blue. Now, you may notice, as they entered under NART and not Ferrari, they weren't called Ferraris, but these were Ferrari 158s in all but their name and colours. These were blue Ferraris in Formula 1. So now the stage was set. Ferrari had 2 races left in the season, the United States Grand Prix and the Mexican Grand Prix, but instead of racing in red, they were now blue. At the 1964 United States Grand Prix, we were at Watkins Glen in October 19. The circuit, in the scenic heart of upstate New York, is a venue with immense history. Everyone was ready for the pivotal showdown in the Formula 1 season. As teams and drivers strategized for the race, a red Ferrari was nowhere to be seen. The Italian marquee, instead represented by the sleek blue and white Ferrari 158s. On this day, they faced not only their rivals, but also the weight of their own history. For Ferrari, the 1964 United States Grand Prix was more than a race. It was their defiant stand to prove that the prancing horse could not be tamed by regulatory squabbles or colour schemes. Come qualifying, Jim Clark would grab pole position in his Lotus. However, just behind would be John Surtees in his blue and white Ferrari. Come the race, a bright sun swept over the crowd of 65,000 spectators, all waiting to see the penultimate round of the Formula 1 Championship. Who would win the championship battle? Hill led Clark by 2 points, with Surtees having won 2 of the last 3 races, just 2 points behind Clark in third. When the lights went out, Clark led off the line, but Surtees and Spence quickly went past, dropping the defending champion to third before they reached the top of the hill. After one lap, the order was Surtees, Spence, Hill, Clark, Brabham, Ireland, Gurney and McLaren. Gurney quickly made up for his slow start, moving past Ireland and Brabham. Soon after, Hill managed to pass Spence, claiming the second spot. However, Clark, showing determination, swiftly overtook Hill and set his sights on Surtees. By the 13th lap, Clark had overtaken the lead from Surtees, with a decisive move just before the pits. Over the next 18 laps, Clark extended his lead, demonstrating his dominance over his competitors during this time. The next period of the race saw the positions behind the leader Clark in his Lotus go back and forth, and the win seemed all but certain for Clark, except for the fact that he was in a Lotus. On lap 40, Clark's Lotus began to misfire due to fuel injection issues. This meant Surtees, then Hill and Gurney went by before he entered the pits on lap 44. Clark ended up rejoining the race after 2 laps, and just after that, Team Lotus switched the drivers in an attempt to reduce the amount of points Surtees and Hill could get from the race. By lap 45, Hill had reclaimed the lead from Surtees. The challenge then intensified, as on lap 61, the leaders all had to lap Hill's teammate, the American Richie Ginther. Hill's BRM went straight past Ginther with ease. However, Ginther would do a better job holding up Surtees in his Ferrari and Gurney in the Brabham. It took Surtees and Gurney an extra lap to pass Ginther, and by that time, Hill had built a significant lead. With the championship on the line, Surtees was pushing harder than ever, and just 2 laps later, he ended up spinning while overtaking a backmarker. However, luckily on lap 70, Gurney, who was then in second place, had to retire due to a broken climax engine. Surtees was now in second. Clark, now in third, began closing the gap to Surtees and Hill. He was shaving off seconds per lap and almost reaching his qualifying pace. However, his efforts didn't end up being rewarded, as his Lotus did what all Lotuses do and started having issues. This led to his retirement after 102 laps. He would ultimately be classified 7th, missing out on championship points. For the remainder of the race, Hill and Surtees were the only frontrunners without issues. Surtees, driving for Ferrari, secured a commendable 2nd place. Hill clinched his 2nd victory of the season, extending his lead in the championship standings to 5 points over Surtees and 9 over Clark. A 5th podium of the season meant that Surtees now had a serious chance of earning his first world championship, as drop scores were now coming into play. Jim Clark was now 9 points away from Hill and needed a win and a lot of luck in the season finale to keep his title hopes alive. The final race, the 1964 Mexican Grand Prix, was the most dramatic race of the 1964 Formula 1 season. It was a 3-way battle for the World Championship between Surtees of Ferrari, Jim Clark of Lotus, and Graham Hill of BRM. Surtees started the race in 4th position, behind Clark and his teammate Lorenzo Bandini. He had a chance to win the title if he finished 1st or 2nd, and Clark or Hill failed to score points. However, he faced a major setback at the start of the race, when his Ferrari started missing badly. His engine lost power, and he dropped back to 13th before the issue cleared. Meanwhile, Clark was pushing ahead in the lead, By the end of the second lap, Clark was even further up the road, while Hill and Surtees were running together. Surtees did not give up, and he began to fight his way back through the pack, although behind Hill. He passed several cars, but he was still nowhere near being champion. Luck did strike, however, during the middle of the race, as Bandini began to challenge Hill for third place, and the two touched multiple times. Eventually, Bandini forced a move at the hairpin, which Hill defended, causing Bandini to smack into the back of the BRM and put both cars into a spin. This also ended up bending Hill's exhaust. Surtees then screamed past before Bandini could rejoin, and he inherited third place. But at this rate, Clark would still be champion. Surtees ended up letting Bandini by to hunt down Gurney in second. Meanwhile, Clark was dominating the race, and he looked set to win his second consecutive title. He had a comfortable lead over Gurney. Bandini was in third, but he wasn't a threat to the championship contenders. Surtees was in fourth, but he needed a miracle to catch up with the leaders. That miracle ended up happening. On the last lap, Clark's Lotus suddenly lost oil pressure and slowed down dramatically. Gurney, who was still behind him, inherited the lead. Bandini, who was in third place, was now in second, and Surtees moved up to third. However, at this rate, Hill was the champion, as Bandini still led Surtees, and Surtees needed to finish second to beat Hill, who was down in 13th. The Ferrari team frantically signaled Bandini to slow down and let Surtees pass him. If Bandini didn't see the signal, Surtees in a Ferrari wouldn't be champion. Luckily, Bandini obeyed, and Surtees took the second place just before the finish line. Surtees had won the championship by 1 point over Hill. He became the first and only driver to win the world title in both motorcycles and cars. He also gave Ferrari the first driver's title since 1961, and to this day is the only driver to win a Formula 1 championship in a blue Ferrari. It was a remarkable comeback for Surtees and Ferrari, who had overcome many difficulties and challenges throughout the 64 season. It was also the last time that Ferrari raced in any colour other than red, as their dispute with the FIA regarding the Ferrari 250 LM was resolved by the following season. Since then, Ferrari has raced in red for over 60 years, winning 10 more drivers' titles and 14 constructors' titles, making them the most successful and iconic team in Formula 1 history. Today, it is still true. Ask a child to draw a car, and they will undoubtedly make it red. Subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and if you want more on Formula 1, watch my video on the Ferrari 412 T2 on screen now.